Well, I know you guys all miss him as much as I do, so I had to get Scott Walter on here under some pretense. There's been so little news with regard to the Optimus bots that Scott is our expert on that. But finally, today we had a pretense, and that was a job opening for the bot division, and it seemed to me that it was evidence of maybe well let me start the intro over again. And not really, but I mean, sort of. Elon promised us that he was starting production in November. This could be evidence of what that meant. Hi, Scott.
Yeah. Hi, Randy. How you doing? It's been a while. I've enjoyed watching your videos with Larry and Brian. I've learned quite a bit from both of them. So
No, but not for me.
excellent guests and co-hosts, I guess you could say. So yeah, much appreciated that I have a chance to come back on. And like I say, my wheelhouse is Optimus. There just hasn't been a whole lot out there. Yeah. But I guess today, Alexandra Mertz, she saw the listing and she had some questions about it. And I understand why she had the questions, because this is something we don't want to just talk about. We want to read it and parse it to sort of understand everything that's being said in there, because there might be some nuggets to get some ideas of.
All right, there we go. So here you go. Here is the engineering technician Tesla bot night shift. So take it away. Tell me about what's going on here.
Well, I assume if it's a night shift, it means they have a day shift. So they need to have a second person to come on here. So that's kind of good. I think that's a point that Jeff Lutz made in sort of the thread going along the comments with this. And the highlights that are in there are some of the questions that Alexandra had. And we can, the first one was like, she wanted to know what does multi-degrees of freedom autonomous mobile robots mean?
Well, and we know that from this channel because
but it's a mouthful. And the thing that's funny is that if you didn't read the top where it says Tesla bot, you wouldn't think this has anything to do with Tesla bot. They don't mention it in there. It's just a word salad of all kinds of things. So I don't know why they're putting it. So the first thing that was intriguing to me is that, Tesla's mobile robotics team designs, builds, and deploys systems enabling scalable and flexible manufacturing lines for Tesla's growing product and factory portfolio. Now that's rather interesting, whether they're talking about the growing products, meaning, the different cars that they're coming out with, or whether they're talking about a portfolio of factory kind of items or goods that they're putting. But, usually when you hear someone talk about, the mobile robots team, you're talking about the traditional mobile robotics, which usually are called, mobile industrial robots, or sometimes AMRs, autonomous mobile robots that are out there. And usually it just means, a little mobile car that's able to self-drive at the factory. That's what you think of a mobile robot. It's basically a glorified Roomba that's a little bit bigger and is able to move around autonomously to pick up things and move them around. They're very famous in how they work in Amazon warehouses. These little Kiva robots that go around. You also see slightly bigger versions of them, which are wheeled. They usually just have 4 wheels on them. There might be some 3-wheeled versions, but usually they have 4 wheels. And in some cases, the wheels might be able to steer, or it's done differentially. And they're usually battery powered, and they just pick up a pallet or some equipment and move these things around. And they may have like tracks that they follow, or they might be able to go and sort of steer themselves through a normal lane using actually LiDAR. They have LiDAR systems on there. So a lot of the very first autonomous vehicles came out of the factories and being able to figure out how these things work. And LiDAR was the way to go because it's a very structured environment. It's very easy to do. And as we know, it's kind of a crutch to allow you to do it.
Right.
And driving in a factory is not as complicated as driving in the real world.
Sure.
And they drive very slowly and everything else. There's all sorts of safeguards there. So that's usually what you think of when you're thinking of, mobile robots. So when I read that team, it's like, obviously they got a team that's working on that, because every factory and anyone that's doing any sort of manufacturing is using these as solutions. They're kind of a replacement for traditional conveyor systems.
Right.
So, I mean, the one way I kind of look at it is if you have like a river that is dividing a city, right? There's 2 ways to get goods from one side of the city over to the other. So it's like, you have that problem in a factory. I've got stuff on one side of the factory. I've got to get it over to the other. And there's, like aisleways or something that are blocking me. And one way I can get that stuff over is I can just have boats or ferries just going from shore to shore and picking up what they need and dropping it off. And we know that's kind of, you have a ferry schedule and you can only do so much. The other is I can go ahead and build more infrastructure. I can build a bridge, I can build rail lines and stuff like that are very dedicated to kind of do it. And whether you decide to do that depends upon the amount of flow that you have. If you've got to get a lot of stuff over there, then you got to build the pipeline, or you got to build the conveyor system or the bridge to do that. But if it's not that much, or if it's like going all over the place, then you want to have the flexibility. So again, we know subways are a great idea in a city, right? But the subway system takes a long time to build, and it's very inflexible. There's something like some new neighborhood pops up that's really trendy and everyone needs to get from there to downtown. It's like, are we going to build a subway over there? Or are we just going to come up with like a new bus line? Because a bus line, like overnight, you can redirect where the buses are going to go. So this is the idea, is that in order to get the flexibility in the factory, you would be doing something like that.
So let's stop for my own pea brain. So I had never thought about the fact that it says the growing product and factory portfolio. So what we might be talking about is not just the Optimus robot, but other factory
maybe
or things that are related to the robot itself. If you have a robot, here's a couple of other things.
Or they're talking about their traditional products. So, they're trying to make flexible manufacturing lines for Tesla's growing product and factory portfolio. And that could be anything. Remember, not just the cars, they also are making mega packs and solar panels and all these other things. So, but at the same time, the products that we're talking about here, so if you look at the first sentence alone, I would say, it's just they're just trying to figure out how the factories to build the stuff that they sell. Yeah. Okay. And then products include, wait a minute, you're referring to the growing products. So that products refers to the growing products in the sentence before, include multiple degree of freedom autonomous mobile robots.
Yes.
And again, that's like, okay, multiple degree of freedom, autonomous mobile. Again, autonomous mobile robots is this fancy little Roomba that's able to drive itself around. Right. And it has multiple degrees of freedom because it's got like more than one wheel that spins, right? Which means it can go straight and it can go left and right. It can turn. So that's basically multiple degrees of freedom. But that's kind of a really lame way. Usually when we think of multiple degrees of freedom, we're thinking of like a human arm that has, more than 2 or 3 or 4. But, technically multi would be more than one, right? So I'm reading that and like, well, that could describe a robot, but it could describe maybe a mobile robot with an arm on it, because you can have those possibilities. So I'm getting really confused about, are they talking about Optimus there? Or are they talking about that they also have these other potential products that they're bringing to bear that they're just starting to build up? And that's why I think this is really intriguing, is like, there might be a lot more going on in that skunk works than we think.
Could be.
It really could be. So the team joins mechanical, electrical, software, manufacturing, engineering disciplines to a highly, okay, that makes sense. I mean, that's what you got to do to build these stuff. Engineering technicians within the mobile robotics division work side by side with engineers to support the development of our prototype robots and subsystems. Our prototype robots with a plural? Now, does that mean that the different copies of Optimus that we're coming up with, or are they talking about other, what was the term that Ashok used? Something about artificial animals?
Yeah. Or just
neural network training,
or just variations of the robot. Yeah.
And so I'm already like, are they already working on just different variations of the Optimus robot? I mean, just tweaking a little bit. Or are they talking about a really broad portfolio here? So that is an interesting word. Or it kind of looked like in the statement that they said there is, our prototype robots and subsystems. You'll be building the first iterations of the machines that make the machines, including highly actuated, electronically, computationally dense robots. Okay, computationally dense. Is that one way of saying the robots are stupid? Or does that mean there's a lot of computation in a very small area? I'm not quite sure. Man, you are computationally dense, Randy. Do you know that?
Never mind.
Yeah.
You're supposed to only say that in the green room, not actually on.
Right. Okay. Now, so the first iteration, so we're iterating on the Optimus design. And again, the machines that make the machines, there's a lot of latitude in what that means, because Elon keeps on talking about the factory that makes the cars. Okay. So these are the machines, these are our products. But are these machines that make the machines? Are the bots making the bots? You can almost make that inference there.
They've already said that's going to happen. He's clearly stated.
We've seen that, and I've speculated that the way they would do that, and my feeling is that, I think I called it a sofa full of SOBs. Okay, and a sofa is just self-organizing factory automation.
Oh, okay.
And SOBs are just basically a self-organizing bots.
I see.
Okay, so the idea is that you could have a factory where you can get rid of a lot of the traditional factory equipment just because you start putting the robot in there. So again, we were just talking about mobile robots, right? The whole idea of mobile robots is to be able to move material from one place to another, because manufacturing is a logistics challenge. It's all about material flow, moving stuff from here to there and making sure it gets there on a timely basis. It's basically, literally is the, the arteries or the circulatory system of the factory. Without it, nothing works. Sure. So you've got to be able to move these things around. And there's a variety of ways of moving things depending upon the speed and the requirements. So sometimes like a human worker can carry something from here to there, but if it has to be done really quickly and over a long way, we start saying, well, wait a minute, we don't want to use the human that way. The human has got a different skill set than doing a process, and that we would prefer to use something else. And maybe it's a small mobile robot that's going to move something around. Maybe it's a conveyor system. Maybe it's an overhead conveyor. Maybe someone drives up with a fork truck or something like that doing it. Right. But in many cases, Optimus can act like a mobile robot. I don't think it would work as a mobile robot for like a long haul situation. You want to bring something for a very far distance. But for some of these shorter things, it might make sense, because what's going on the factory floor is that someone is doing a process and they're handing it off to someone else or some other process. And something is taking it, and it may be taking a short distance. And it could be, well, it might just make sense if that person then picks it up and takes it off to the next one. Or we have someone else come in and grab it around there. But usually they'll try to automate it or do something else. But when you start getting the Optimus bot, you can start seeing it fitting in a lot of these niches where normally you wouldn't have a human doing that. Mm-hmm. And that normally you have a division of labor. That's the way Henry Ford set everything up, is like this person just does one thing and you just keeps doing that same thing again and again and again. And you don't bother to take that particular individual and change the operation to something else, because they can't context switch that quickly. But if you're thinking of like the Optimus thought, I'm working on something, and when I'm done with that, I can either hand it off to someone else to their workstation, or I can just pick it up and go over to that workstation and bring it to the next place to do it. And then some other bot can just kind of slide right in when it notices that my workstation is now open. They can come in and do it. So I can start seeing this organization where you are now, the bots are sort of figuring out where is the supply problem we're having right now, is being able to, what process is kind of behind, and then we can like throw more resources there, and which ones have too much, in which case we can reallocate everything. And I was thinking of that as an example of the bots building the bots.
Yes.
That, you've got, this main line of sorts, which would be the torso, and you need to put these limbs on there. And so you can have these stations here where these different limbs are, the left arm, the right arm, the left leg, the right leg is being kind of put together and assembled. And when it's done, you got to go and bring it to the torso. Well, whoever is building that limb, when they're done, they can either hand it off to someone else and then start building another one, or they can just pick it up and walk it on over there and then put it on there. And as they go away, their station is free, and another bot comes in and says, hey, we need another left limb. They start building it. Or they might go, wait a minute, we don't need a left limb. There's like 3 guys standing over there. Why do you put left limbs on torsos they don't have? We have a shortage of but we have a shortage of legs right now. So that kind of knows, wait a minute, I got to go over to the leg. So, that's what I'm saying, that it become self-organizing, and they kind of move them around. They deploy as they want, and you start getting rid of the actual mobile robots. You start getting rid of the conveyor systems. You start getting rid of all these things. And basically your factory floor is like this big empty room where you put down tables, which are just going to be like your workbenches, and you just slide them around wherever you think they belong. And I can just see that will be the way the factory of the future is going to look like, as you have these bots that are able to start reorganizing and doing tasks that you would decide, no, we don't want the person to do that, because we want that person in the zone for building left arms.
Yes.
They're really good at that. We want them going really, really fast at it. We don't want them then having to walk over there and then like, what do I have to do? It attaches to the torso. Let's give it to the attachment of the torso specialist. It's like, no, maybe you don't need to do that. So anyways, that's me going down a rabbit hole on something completely different, of this machine being able to build the machine. Yeah. Now, so you will have a blend of hands-on builds and responsibilities around analysis, testing, and documentation. Okay, makes sense. Projects are open-ended and often limited to upfront guidance. Well, it sounds like kind of fun. A successful candidate for this position must have a broad background in mechatronics, industrial and/or automation, maintenance, testing, et cetera, and be a self-starter, et cetera. Okay, so.
Yeah, it sounds like the very typical Tesla environment of
yes,
you want people that can just jump in, do the job, work in teams, lots of collaboration, get it done, move on to the next thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Now, so, it's like including highly actuated, electronically, computationally dense robots. Okay, so highly actuated means lots of degrees of freedom. I was almost wondering if they're talking about the fact that the actuators themselves are also electronically and computationally dense, which I think they are, but they're kind of referring about the robots. But there seems to be, let's say, a lot of compute and controls in each of the servos, if we can see from the designs, because the servos kind of know a lot of what's going on. They're more than just a motor. I mean, I've asked people, when they hear an actuator, do they know what an actuator is? And an actuator is kind of a fancy word for a motor, but it's a little bit more because actuators include usually more than a motor. They usually also have like a transmission or gearbox associated with them. And they have the ability to measure their movement and how fast and how far they've gone. And so you would get a command to say, I want you to move this thing this distance. And that's what the actuator is able to do. It actuates by moving something. So it's a very fancy motor is basically what an actuator is. Right. Now, what we don't know, now we know in November, that's when they're going to start building the first actuators out of the Tesla design ones. And we are in November. We don't know if November means that they're doing it right now or they're very close.
Yeah, and that was kind of a guess, right? We weren't sure whether November was going to be, we are going to start building the tooling for production, or whether we're actually going to start producing some of the things that we're currently building the tooling for. There was some confusion. Does this help you at all in terms of this job responsibility to have a better idea of what you think they'll be doing in November?
Yeah, I mean, looking at this, so, they're working with engineers to fabricate, assemble, and integrate mobile robot prototypes. And again, it's like, we assume this is a Tesla bot when they're talking about a mobile robot prototype and not a normal one, including mechanical assemblies, electrical systems, wire harnesses, et cetera. And there's a lot in there about talking about, wanting to build wire harnesses and a lot of the tooling and everything like that, and using kind of these, test benches to be able to set everything up. So it still almost sounds like more doing the prototyping in advance of getting the production going, sort of understanding a bit better what these bots are going to look like. So what was the title of it again? So let's look at it very closely. Let's just go back up and see what it is, because we know it's the night shift. And it's just an engineering technician for the Tesla bot. So it's someone that's going to help work on it and probably refine it. All we know from the Q3 report was some mention in there that they are doing tweaks to the Tesla bot. There's been some iterations on the design from what we've seen, and we don't know exactly what those are, but there seem to be some improvements.
But then the next bullet seems to suggest the next level.
Yep.
Develop test plans and test systems, including building of assembly jigs.
Yeah. So again, they're trying to work on how they're to build to increase the production of the overall system. Jigs tells me it's going to be more traditional sort of manufacturing in some ways, which may be how they start out, and then eventually they come up with, like I'm saying, the sofa full of SOBs.
Right. And then they're going to be assembling test and validation systems.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to collaborate with engineering teams to root cause and resolve mechanical and electrical issues. So again, that could be in the prototype. That could be in the setting up of the tooling. It could be
the tooling is going to be a nightmare too.
Yeah.
Like, there's always going to be mechanical, and I think somewhere down there they mentioned background in PLCs and stuff like that, particularly the Beckhoff. So that sounds in some ways like you're getting very close to the manufacturing, because the Tesla bot does not need a PLC. Okay.
Yeah.
A factory uses a PLC. It's what's controlling what's going on in the manufacturing process everywhere. So when they're looking at that, it's a rather interesting technician that may be helping support the development of the production line.
Yeah. And then we want to provide detailed and written verbal test status updates to key stakeholders. Well, that would always be true, no matter where you are in the process. Support engineering teams in instrumentation and data acquisition, setup, and logging.
Yep. So again, you want to get an idea of what the throughput's going on is like to say have an idea what your yields are. Maintain a lab that's well stocked with the tools and everything they're going to need to keep building everything, if that makes sense. Make prototype wire harnesses.
I keep talking about those wire harnesses.
And I'm wondering if they're talking about the wire harnesses on the Tesla bot, or if they're just talking about all the darn wire harnesses you need for the production equipment.
Yeah.
There's miles and miles of that stuff all over the place, and figuring out how to get it around to where it needs to be. So that's what it sounds like. That's probably what they're focusing on. Support low volume prototype part builds and testing. So that's a little bit of manual. But I would think they also want to figure out how to go ahead and go beyond prototyping and start ramping up.
And interface components from other engineering and purchasing groups within Tesla.
Yep. So that might be, the components that are coming from different groups that are putting together manufacturing systems within Tesla. They already have an expertise in certain things.
All right. So
as well as they're purchasing equipment from outside or components from outside, and need to be able to understand how those are going to be interfaced together. So and usually interfacing those components means not just a mechanical interface, but also a software interface, which I think comes down to one of the bullet points a little bit later in there when they talk about, it was a knowledge, or I think it was like the background, and they wanted someone that had like knowledge and backgrounds of using PLCs, and that I think they said Beckhoff would be, an advantage if you had the background in that particular PLC. But for the most part, whether you understand, the ladder logic of a PLC and how they work and be able to program it. If you work with one, you can easily pick up another.
So now that you've seen this, you've looked at it, you've studied it, you've analyzed it, you've worked on a lot of situations where you've helped companies come on stream with brand new products, setting up all of their factory equipment and setting up all their automation, setting up their robotics. And if you would see this kind of a job description, where in the process would you think they would be? Just in general, first off the top of your head, when you saw it, where did you think that they would be?
I think they're starting to make the transition from the lab build ones to figuring out how are we going to scale up now. Okay. So they want to be able to understand how to scale up. And again, I'm just confused that if we didn't look at the title, we would not know this has anything to do with a Tesla bot.
You're right.
And then I'm wondering if the mobile robotics team that they're talking about is like trying to implement and deploy what could be Tesla-built mobile robots, which surprises me because there's a lot of companies out there that make mobile robots, and I don't see why Tesla would need to necessarily build them themselves. They would integrate them, more than likely. But so the mobile robotics team, builds and deploys systems, and so a system could be bringing those mobile robots in and just trying to figure out how to get it to work within a factory, because these mobile robots are never, just kind of plug and play. There's a lot of other stuff you got to do to get it to work. So it's nice to get someone else's hardware, but there's always a lot of programming and everything you have to do to get it to work for your particular system. As well as, the one that just comes down, it's like, how many of them do we even need? So you've got to do a full scale simulation of figuring out how many mobile robots you need driving around. To be able to do it. So you don't want to have too many of them that are just sitting around parked on the side, because they're costly. And of course, you don't want to have too few, because then suddenly you can't meet your production needs. You also want to, look at congestion and all these other things that are going on. So I've done many simulations where, we're trying to find out what that number is, and does it even make sense? And also again, those examples of simulations where we're trying to see does it make sense to use a mobile robot over a traditional system like a conveyor system?
Yeah.
So I've seen one where, one cell connected to a sort of another cell where it was connected the traditional way. You just put one conveyor over to the other, it's like a bridge going from one city center to the other. And they're saying like, we think we can do this with a mobile robot. I'm like, are you crazy? It's like tearing down a bridge and putting a ferry in. Who would want to do that? And we did the simulation and I was shocked to see that. Yeah, the mobile robot made more sense because it brought in a certain amount of flexibility because it wasn't just, coming across the river to the other side. When you get to the other side, sometimes you wanted to go somewhere else than where you ended up.
I see.
And so it's like the idea is like with this is you can go directly to the harbor you really want to go to rather than having to drive through the city streets and like basically clogging up the city streets. So you begin to find out that when you implement these mobile robot systems, they really change the configuration of your factory and can make it way more efficient. So that's an important thing to do is to look at it ahead of time. But that's not what they're talking about here. They're talking about actually building and deploying these things.
Right.
So
if I was to try to get you to put a fine point on it, if you were seeing this kind of a job being offered in a factory where you were helping them put the thing together, would you think that they would be more than a year away from production? Would you think they'd be more than 6 months away from production? As a man,
it's okay. So from this, what I was trying to tease out is I had to make sure I didn't have like the bias in my head that, this is like a Tesla bot job. It's like, someone's going to be going in there and helping Tesla bot team do something. And it may be a step removed of helping one of the teams that's figuring out how to ramp up the production of the Tesla bot at this time. Yeah. So again, if they're talking about the mobile robotics team, they must be talking about the team that is figuring out how to create a flexible manufacturing cell. And that flexible manufacturing cell is something for the Tesla bot. And at this point, they're beyond just we're trying to figure out a design. We're starting to get more in the implementation, which is why you have a second shift. You have some work in the night shift to kind of take over and start building these things up. So they are probably getting to that phase where they're starting to integrate a lot of different components. They're trying to bring them in and they're trying to see how they're going to work. So it's probably sort of like the Cybertruck line. It's like they get something working, but it's not 100% working right now.
Right.
It's able to roll. And so they may be the point they're starting to roll some things off. And now they're trying to figure out how can we ramp this up a little bit more? Because otherwise, every time I've seen a Tesla bot job listing, you see Tesla bot in there all the time, mentioned again and again and again. And here's it's not mentioned at all. So again, at first I was thinking like, why are they so obsessed about the wire harnessing of the Tesla bot? It's like that should be the designer's issue or something else. And then I realized, it's the wire harnessing for all the manufacturing equipment they're trying to put in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, progress is being made. Hires are being made. A second shift for me always tells me that somebody's well along in their thinking. Generally speaking, don't need a second shift unless there's a lot of work to be done on that specific category of stuff that's being done. So I don't know. Seems like maybe they're close to being on track. I'm thinking that this would be very high on Elon's list of things he wants to get done as quickly as possible, because of not only because of the volume potential but also because of the savings across the factories when these are deployed.
Yeah. Now, the thing to remember is they could have, in some ways, already started Cybertruck production lines a few years ago. But then again, they would have been designing it for the wrong Cybertruck.
Right.
Because it changed. It evolved. They needed to add new things, and then you would have had to tear that line up and do it all over again. And it's probably the same thing here is that while they're thinking about what to do, they are making sure we're not going to fully commit on the production line until we're really satisfied with the design.
Right.
And so they've been making those tweaks. They're probably getting very, very close. And now it looks like they're getting ready to do it. And it could be one of those things that they are able to start to manufacture at a low volume. And they're just going to be adding improvements more and more along the way so they can start to scale up. To get the bigger numbers. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're not starting to get something out. I think they need to start getting slightly bigger numbers right now in order to do the training.
Right.
You know, before we had speculated on what the training was going to look like.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, they could probably do a lot of it with simulation. But now that they're starting to do more end to end, I think they're going to have a little bit more real world kind of interaction in there. You know, they'll do a lot with videos and some of the other things, but, you know, they may be finding that there's so much limits that you can do in that the bots have to interact with the real world to start understanding the real world better. Because physics is very hard to simulate, especially at a very nuanced level.
So Elon, in his conversation the other day with Joe Rogan, was talking about how there needs to be a movie about how to build and run a factory. And while that might be somewhat interesting if it was a manufacturing, auto manufacturing business, I would think that a robot manufacturing business might be way more interesting as a movie topic. If people, if people were in there now, hopefully taking some videos of how they're training these robots, of how they're, you know, the robots not functioning properly and having to come up with alternatives, there might be, you know, quite a story here.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think there is. There's going to be a lot of false starts and, you know, a lot of trial and error and things, and then eventually you start to see different improvements of what can happen in the training. A lot of mid-course corrections all the time of finding something better. And you know, there is a problem that as you're going along, you can keep on coming up with these great ideas on how to optimize something. And then you never actually build it because there's always like one more optimization you can do after it and after that. So I'm sure at some point they've decided that this is good enough. We're going to go ahead and do it. And then we get that out and then we start working on the next generation and then iterate on that. Otherwise, you are going to be maybe missing some of the key inputs you're going to need that will really improve the overall design. And so you've got to start getting the numbers out, as well as the fact that there's enough low-hanging fruit that the bot can start doing useful work in the factory.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think you can start doing that. So they need to start looking at this. Yeah, so I think that's probably all on that.
All right, Scott, thank you so much for being on board. And to all of you out there, it has been great talking to you. Is somebody going to join Patreon? All right, I'm going to make a deal. This is going to be, I've done this once before. It worked a little bit. Actually got a lot of people joining Patreon the last 2 weeks. But the last 2 days, not a single soul. So let's get you up on Patreon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one free audiobook. You can have 2 free if you want. Or you can have 1 free audiobook and the Cybertruck bottle opener. How's that? 1 and 1. Okay. If you join at the $10 level, not at the $5 level. If you join at the $5 level, you just get the 1 book. Now, if you're completely new to the channel, this is a bottle opener. It is a refrigerator magnet. It is 3 millimeter thick, stainless steel, really, really tough. Comes in a very cool magnetic box that makes it a great gift item. So, you know, it's got all kinds of people now buying them as gifts as a result of the fact that I have so many people that want to buy them as gifts, and they're putting in these larger orders. I do have it all down. I think I put it all down below. I'll have to double check and make sure that it's up to date. They're normally $25 a piece. You get 2 for $45. You get 3 for $60. Okay. You get 100 for $210, and you get 200 for $400. Gets you all the way down to $20 a piece. If you are out of the country, I need you to add another $20 to that for freight, whichever one of those ones you pick. And then if you are, and then please let me know camo or regular. And of course you can mix and match if you buy quantities, however you want to set that up. So is there anything else I have left for you tonight? I think I've said it all. I have enjoyed speaking with you yet again.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.